Welcome to Second Saturday Conversation. This is a place and a time when we explore Christianity in and for the 21st century. I mean, what is our situation? And what is Christian message? Both are problematic and both are changing, and I think changing quickly. So here we explore and reflect on both our situation and what is the message that can help us live our lives together and into a future of hope and promise. My little beloved Theo must see something outside. If Christianity is to have good news for the 21st century, I think that we are going to have to reimagine it, reinvent it, reconstruct it. And for some, this might sound threatening, dangerous, even heretical, but for others, it's past due. Those of us who gather on Second Saturday, I think that we are restless with inquiry. We're aware that there is, hello, Theo, say good morning, Theo, to our Second Saturday folks. Thank you, darling. By the way, it's about 4 degrees here in Oregon today. We have had snow. It's snowing as we speak. And I think that Theo knows that we can't go outside with any great comfort today. So he may be a little restless, but that's all right. Restless as are we, as I said, we're restless with inquiry. And I think that all of us here have an awareness that there is a multiplicity of approaches to questions and to hunches about God and how to live our lives. There's a diversity of opinion and thought. I mean, we are all diverse. And it's my sense that on Second Saturday that we share what Walt Whitman calls a democratic, that small d, democratic and poetic vision of religious and cultural pluralism. And Walt Whitman says that this is not only a pluralism in society, but a pluralism in the soul. We are a multitude, he writes. We are a multitude. And this brings me to our overall title for our program year this year, Skylight and Seasoned Tongue and Groove. It's an image from a poem of Seamus Heaney's entitled Skylight, and we will post that poem as one of our closing slides. Skylight is perhaps akin to multitude. Skylight allows us to see more. It opens a way for us to see beyond the immediate. And where Seasoned Tongue and Groove defines the ceiling and keeps out the sky, Skylight has a way, as Seamus Heaney says, of holding surprise wide open. Now, there's benefit to Seasoned Tongue and Groove. It provides comfort and security and maybe a feeling of safety. But there's much more going on out there. And so together we dare to venture and explore. So welcome to Second Saturday. Jeff, do you want to orient us a little bit to our plenary time and how to raise a hand and all of that?
Sure. Good morning, Marianne.
Hey, Jeff.
We're experiencing snow and blizzard conditions here in Portland too, which is a lot less common than it is in Bend.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
So, well, welcome everybody. It's great to have so many of you here with us. After Marianne has shared her reflections with us, there'll be an opportunity for you to interact with Marianne. If you have a question, a comment, and the way that we handle that time, because there's so many of us here, is that if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you have a number of different choices, and one of those choices says reactions. If you go down to reactions and click on that, you'll get an option to raise your hand. And if you do that, that will show up on your little video, and I'll know to call on you, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question, share your observation with Marianne. So we'll be doing that afterwards, and we'll talk about that again. So thanks, Marianne.
Yeah, okay. Take care there, Jeff. Yeah, and it's chill. It's 4 degrees out in Bend today. So yeah.
Wow.
And here we go. There we are. Today I want to continue the conversation that we began at our last second Saturday on December 9th with Jack Caputo and Brandon Scott. And I'm noticing that my computer is doing some weird things. Jake, are you there? There we go. Jake, are you shuffling the deck for us a little bit?
Yeah.
That's fine.
I don't know how to turn off participants' ability to do that.
Oh.
Somebody's trying to share their whiteboard.
Oh.
And it just takes over everything. So
my goodness. Well, I don't even know what that is. So you want to just say to that whoever's trying to do that, not to?
Yeah.
Okay. So as I said, I'm so low tech. That's why I'm totally dependent on Jake. So anyway, here we go. Jack and Brandon began a conversation about Jesus last time, and I want to continue that conversation. And I'm actually reminded of a poem by Rilke, who he says, I circle around God, around the primordial tower. I've been circling for 1,000 years, and I still don't know if I am a falcon or a storm or a great song. And Rilke is actually reflecting about himself. And I have used that. Are you a falcon, a storm, or a great song, to actually introduce Jack Caputo. But today, I think about that in terms of Jesus. A falcon, a storm, a great song. So let me recap a little bit from Jack and Brandon. Brandon began talking about Jesus by introducing one of Jesus' parables. And it was the parable of the leaven in the loaf. And parables were Jesus' preferred teaching style. All right, this is how he taught, was in parables. It's a form of story. It sort of tells the truth, but tells it slant. And his parables are about the kingdom of God more than they are about God. Brandon said in good Jewish tradition, Jesus doesn't say much directly about God. After all, the name of God is one that cannot even be uttered. Okay, but that Jesus did speak of, described the kingdom of God. Okay, so his parables do just that. And Brandon chose the parable of the leaven, the woman who hid the leaven in the loaf. And I think that this is a brilliant way to introduce Jesus, not only with parable, but are you okay, sweetie? Not only with parable, but with this particular parable. The notion is that a woman hides leaven in a loaf, and that this is descriptive of the kingdom of God. Now, leaven was considered unclean, and the first century world was ordered by what was thought to be clean and unclean. Those weren't moral categories. They were categories of what is in their proper place and what is in proper order. And, purity is about dirt, matter out of place. So the purity system was really a way to structure the world that kept things in their proper place and in proper order. And this was even thought to be reflective of the divine order. So for Jesus to have a parable to describe the kingdom of God as being like a woman who incidentally didn't have much status in a patriarchal world, to have a woman place leaven, an unclean thing, in a loaf as descriptive of the kingdom of God, would set every hearer on edge. I mean, this was hardly what would be considered either appropriate or expected. And as Brandon said, the kingdom of God, once it's entered something, it'll corrupt everything. It'll change everything. And it can change the way that the world will look like. Brandon also mentioned that 3 measures, I guess that she put in 3 measures of leaven, that 3 measures is a literary device that's used in other stories to indicate that, to announce that this is an epiphany. So the 3 measures in the leaven, in the loaf of leaven, this is an epiphany. This is a realization of something. This is a manifestation of something. And by the way, we're in the season of Epiphany right now in the liturgical calendar, the church calendar, a season when what is hidden becomes revealed. At least that's some of the thematic work of this season in the church year. So for Jesus to describe this parable in this way is to say, this is important. This is an epiphany. This is a disclosure of the kingdom of God. So what are the hearers to do when they hear something like this? To go ahead and try to envision this, or to reject it altogether? As Brandon said, Jesus' parables teased the mind, he said, teased the mind, and would do so by bringing the hearer's imagination into an experience, okay? So Brandon was keen to say that Jesus' parables and Jesus' teaching style is not conceptual as much as it is imaginary. So he said, to think theologically about a parable like this isn't going to help you very much. But he suggests that what we do need to hear and maybe try to grasp these stories or have them grasp us is through a poetics, an imaginative visioning. And this kind of imaginative visioning and challenging the way that we customarily see or assume things are or are to be. This is very, very characteristic of Jesus, of his teaching, and is characteristic of all of his parables. Some even suggest that Jesus himself was a parable. Actually, I think it was Don Crossan who said that. So Jesus not only had a way of saying he reimagined the world, but he also reimagined the nature and character of God. He made statements that had God be understood or revealed in ways that were completely unexpected, and that sort of defied the conventional, divinely ordered world that was assumed. And I think that the fact that Jesus challenged notions of how to conceptualize, how to imagine, God, I actually think that's one of the reasons he got executed. So Jack agrees with Brandon that what is happening with Jesus, it has less to do with concepts than it does with what Jack says is an intuition, a collaboration of mind and body, conscious and unconscious, that brings forth an image that expresses something about God, very different than how we've assumed. Jack suggests that Jesus himself is an intuition about God. He's an embodiment of an intuition about God. I think that's a really interesting thought and comment. So parables are something that cannot be fact checked, okay? But these kind of stories, they, by the very nature of their images, they produce something. They generate something that had not already been decided. They, by their images, instigate something new or novel in their images. And this kind of discursive form of languaging is theopoetic. In fact, I mean, Jesus certainly wouldn't have called himself that, but we might consider when we think about what is theopoetics, that Jesus himself was a theopoet. And it, by poetic, I don't mean ornamental. I don't mean language that pretties up something that we already know. But poiesis means to make or to create. So the theopoetic actually produces something new. It brings a new image, thought, idea, imaginary into play. Jesus' parables don't explain anything, and actually they don't really clarify anything. They're not logical like theological might be, but a theopoetic way of expressing is fully aware that we cannot capture, for instance, the mystery of God. We cannot capture it. We cannot contain it. So Jesus' parables and a theopoetic way of understanding language about God, what it does do is provoke a radically different vision of existence. It provokes a radically different vision of existence that we hadn't thought of before. And Jack calls Jesus' vision of the kingdom of God, he calls it sacred anarchy. So Jesus' parables, his mode of teaching, sort of turns everything upside down, inside out. I mean, there's no clean or unclean. That those categories get all mixed up with Jesus. There's in Jesus' parables and in his teaching and in his behavior, the marginalized and the outcast, they take central place. I mean, for instance, like the shepherds in Luke's story, shepherds are an outcast class, and yet they were the ones to whom the angels spoke of the forthcoming birth of Jesus. We might think of the Good Samaritan in one of Jesus' parables. I mean, what was good about a Samaritan, right? Or the prodigal son is the one for whom a banquet is given, right? So, in Jesus' speaking, I mean, the last are first, the first are last. The rich are sent away empty. Jesus' imaginative suggestions, Jesus as theopoet more disrupts, maybe disturbs, dismantles what is considered even sacred and holy, or certainly what is socially acceptable. And in doing so, he sort of redefines, re-questions, I mean, what it is to be human, what is it to be valued, and what is valued by God. I mean, Jesus did that then in his day. And I think in our reading of Jesus today, I think we go through a similar process. So, I mean, Jesus, as you all know, was concerned about the poor, the outcast, the marginalized, the silenced, those who suffered. And he responded to injustices, though non-violently. He emphasized healing and forgiveness. He talked about loving neighbor. He talked about loving the enemy. For him, I dare say God was unpredictable. God was a hidden God. He was even hidden, but hidden in negativity and in suffering. God is hidden in maybe what were considered non-people or non-events. He is hidden in the ignored and the marginalized. And God disclosed to the sinful. I mean, in Jesus' teaching, there was wisdom through folly, strength through weakness, life through death. I mean, Jesus' vision was a reversal of ordinary social, political, cultural, and religious standards. And I think that Jesus' teaching, that people began to wonder, does God lead history or disrupt it? Does God appear at the center of things or at the margins? So Jack and Brandon both assert that Jesus shattered conventional understanding of God and the kingdom of God. And that also shattered or questioned a divine authority that was presupposed in his current religious structures and the current assumptions of the day. And I think he continues to do that in our day. So Jesus had an imaginative vision of what was going on in the name of God, and therefore what the kingdom of God might look like. I also want to note that Brandon and Jack both feel that Jesus and Christianity today, in our 21st century, requires deconstruction. They would both say that is our task, and that is, deconstruction is not a negative thing. Deconstruction it wants to unbind Christianity and Jesus from the fetters of tradition and from traditions, actually rather imperialistic and absolutist and privileged, the way they have privileged Christianity and Christian texts and claims about Christianity. Deconstruction wants to free the heart of Christianity from that and to see what's underneath it. Sort of what gave rise to all of that stuff in the first place. And so deconstruction isn't about smashing the state. It's about sort of unfolding, unpacking some things and seeing what's underneath. What is the deepest affirmation underneath all of this stuff? Okay, that's part of the function of deconstruction. So Jack said that he, in his own work and life, is reinventing what he learned from his Catholic upbringing and also as being in a religious order. And he said very clearly, he's not interested in blowing it all up. He also says that Christianity is always reinventing itself, that it's always reinventing. It has throughout history, and that it needs to. And that it is this, we are at a time too where we need to reinvent or allow Christianity to reinvent itself. Brandon thinks that we actually need to get beyond Jesus and Christianity. For Brandon, if I heard him correctly, that sort of the rigidity and the certainty and the dogmatic tradition that we've inherited has left Christianity bankrupt. And so Brandon wonders really if it isn't time to just leave it, leave Christianity and leave even Jesus, okay? Our wonderment, my wonderment is that if we open up and unfold and uncover and unbind Christianity and Jesus enough, will we find new life there after all? And I think yes, but what I'm interested to hear from you today is, do you think Jesus is important? And why do you think he's important? Does he matter? Why does he matter? Or, is he buried and dead under the rubble of Christian tradition and modernism? And now the suspicions of postmodernism. Well, I think Jesus is important. And I think that what Jack and Brandon were describing about Jesus' really radical vision of humanity and the world and God, I think that we have barely digested that. I mean, we have tended to domesticate it. And we even see some domestication of Jesus' vision in our own canon. In our Gospels, we see a domestication of the radicality of Jesus. So our tendency is to want to kind of, quote unquote, normalize it in some ways. But I think that we've hardly let the radicality of Jesus' vision really take hold of us, and we certainly haven't metabolized it. So I think we can still learn from him, and that he can invite us into a theopoetic revisioning of Christianity and of the kind of icon and figure that Jesus himself is for us. But when we think about Jesus today, I don't think we can any longer think of Jesus as part of a two-world view. In other words, a world of heaven and then this world, a supernatural world and then this world. That God is up there, out there somewhere, and that we are down here. I think that two-world notion is, it was part of the ancient world's scientific vision, but it is no longer ours. And I think that we have to rethink Christianity and even the importance of Jesus, not in terms of this world and the next, or that he even came down from somewhere else here. I mean, to think that God and Jesus come from on high. Historicity doesn't come from the sky. So I think we just have to rethink that. And I think we have to rethink this notion that God is anthropomorphic, that God is even a being. Okay, this is part of the challenge of modernity and postmodernity, that God is not a supernatural being up there, out there. God is something other than that. And how we define that, we're still working on that. And maybe even, I mean, Jesus can help us there, that in some ways God is an activity. Gordon Kaufman, as you might remember, suggests that to even think of God as creativity. Not that the concept is creative, but that God itself is creativity, which also says that, I mean, creativity can produce the good, the true, the beautiful. Creativity can also create havoc. So the challenge for us is to reimagine how we understand God. And I think that when we think about Jesus, that I would like us to think about him today, not in terms of what we think the tradition says about him, that, well, the reason he's important is because he's the Son of God, the only Son of God, or the reason that he's important is because God sent him, or the reason that he's important is because he died for our sins. I'd like us to think about Jesus in terms of what are our own judgments about what we can know about Jesus, what we understand about him. Parables is certainly our window into him. But what do we think of Jesus in terms of the situation in which we live today, and in light of our situation, and in light of what direction do we want to go, and what we hope for a future? So I encourage us to just to think a little differently, that, and not talk about Jesus today in terms of proposition, but to talk more about Jesus as possibility, So therefore, our language about God and Jesus will then move away from language of proposition to language of possibility, which is really the language of symbol and metaphor and analogy and ritual and poetics. Okay. So it's inarguable that Jesus is probably one of the most influential figures of history, and for good and bad. I mean, it's ambiguous. What has happened in Christianity is both good and bad. What happens in the name of Jesus is both good and bad. But what Jesus brought was really a new story, a very different vision about possibility for humanity and humaneness, and possibility of how to think and imagine God. So I think that Jesus is, yes, he was a figure of history, and I think that's important, to know what happened to such a figure in history. I mean, he got executed by the domination system. But he's now also an icon of human possibility, and also an icon in a way of disruption. And I wonder if Jesus today, and I borrow too from the thinking of Gordon Kaufman, as well as Jack and Brandon, if Jesus doesn't call us to reassess our humanity and our humaneness, and calls us to rethink or reconstruct our understanding of God, and a world picture that orients our life and helps us to grow and assures a future. Because we are responsible for the human project. And we are responsible increasingly for our planet as well. Henry Nelson Wyman, who was a theologian, gosh, his dates were 1884. He died in 1975. And by the way, he taught for a while at the University of Oregon. But Henry Nelson Wyman, a theologian, said that there were two, as I said, he died in 75, but he said there were two major events in history that really cut the world in two. And those two events, one was the Bethlehem star and the birth of Jesus, and Jesus coming into the world, okay? There was a before Jesus and after Jesus. So it sort of cut the world in two. He said the other event that had a similar but very different transforming power was the hydrogen bomb. That there was the world before the hydrogen bomb and the world after the hydrogen bomb. And that those two things have affected human existence, he thinks, more than anything else. And I think today we might include in that our ecological crisis and what's happening ecologically, and our situation within the ecological crisis that we're in. So I think that part of our task is to really assess the seriousness of our situation today. And if indeed we are not being called to make a reversal of some ordinary social and political and cultural and religious standards. And if indeed Jesus doesn't have something to say to us, if Jesus doesn't have something of value to show us, if Jesus as a figurative icon of what is possible might not inspire us to address the crisis of our time in a radical way that he addressed the crises in his time. So it's up to us, I think, to decide how we're going to go forward. I mean, we have agency. We have the capability to make changes. It's still within our grasp, I think. So how are we going to move forward? And is there something about Jesus and his teaching and the way he taught, his vision, how he saw? And by the way, let me also just underscore something that was mentioned earlier, that not to think about Jesus as being divine and that the reason he had this kind of vision is because he was divine and the Son of God. No, Jesus was a human being like us. And I think our great hope in Jesus is that Jesus was a human being. He shows us what we are, who we are, and what we're capable of. And so Jesus' vision, his sense of perception, his ability to see really into the heart of the matter, as Gerard Manley Hopkins described a chunk of coal, that inside that chunk of gold is, if you were to gash it open, it would pour gold vermilion. So, I mean, Hopkins, for instance, he saw this wonder in the midst of the sensuous living world. Jesus saw deeply into the sensuous living world. Jesus saw deeply into what is worthy of the name of God. Jesus was a human being. And in the evolution of human development, Jesus comes along. And therefore, I think that his standard is not out of reach from us. We are part of that human evolution. And Jesus is an embodiment of our imaginative and visionary possibilities. Okay. So I'd love to hear from you kind of what you make of my approach to talking about Jesus today, and what you think about him, and if you think that returning to Jesus and his teaching, or if you will, keeping Jesus alive is a good thing and makes sense in the 21st century. Before I close, I want to read to you part of a poem from, I don't know how to pronounce, he's Polish, Czesław Miłosz. He was an exiled Pole, so he knows quite a bit about suffering and darkness. But listen to this. Miłosz writes, "Pure beauty, benediction. You are all I gathered from a life that was bitter and confused, in which I learned about evil, my own and not my own. Wonder kept dazzling me, and I recall only wonder." I think Jesus saw pure beauty, benediction, from a life that was bitter and confused. That wonder kept dazzling him. And I think that Jesus can help us see pure beauty, benediction. And when it's over, I hope that what we recall is only wonder. So we have plenty of time for conversation, and I would love to have you, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your perspectives, have you bring some additional angles for our conversation. As we do so, let me review the listening guidelines. And then I see a number of people already in the queue, but let me just review our listening guidelines as we continue to be underway today. Right now, let us just take time to settle in God's presence. And to listen to others with your entire self, with your senses, with your feelings, with your intuition, with your imagination, with your rational faculties. Okay. So as we listen to one another, bring all this into play. Don't interrupt when someone else is speaking, and in that, don't formulate what you want to say while somebody else is speaking, because that's like interrupting. You can pause between speakers to absorb what's been said. Speak for yourself only. Express your own thoughts and feelings. Refer to your own experiences. Avoid being hypothetical. Steer away from broad generalizations. I know this is not easy to do. For us here, we aren't here to challenge what others say, but that doesn't mean we can't be curious. And that doesn't mean we all have to agree. And listen to the group as a whole. There's a real reality to that. and to those who have spoken aloud and to those who haven't spoken yet. And leave space for anyone who may want to speak a first time before speaking a second time yourself. And the last guideline is to hold your desires and opinions, even your convictions, lightly. That's also not so easy. I'm reminded, by the way, of a quote of Bernard Larnagan's that I want to mention too. He says, "Be attentive, be intelligent, be reflective, be responsible." And Lonergan goes on to say, "And if necessary, change." I love that quote of Lonergan's. Okay, so I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to take a note or two as we do so. So, Jeff, you want to help us with this? Anything you want to highlight again before we get underway? And we've got plenty of time for conversation.
Yeah, we do. And we're getting some great comments in the chat as well, and lots of people with their hands raised. So I think you've stirred the pot in a good.
That's my intention, you know, and as you know, stirring a pot, keep it fluid, right? None of this has to stick. None of this has to congeal. This is all this is for conversation, and so good. And I'm, as I have said before, I don't read the chat. It would actually just be too distracting for me. But I hope to read it after the fact. But Jeff, I know you've paid attention to the chat. So Jeff, don't be shy about pulling some things out from the chat if it doesn't happen in our conversation, in our plenary time. Okay?
I will do that.
I'd love it.
As I said, I'll be just calling on the people whose hands are raised. And Sheila Richards, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I would like to answer the question.
Great, Sheila, good to see you.
Yeah, it's 42 below here.
Oh,
Wind,
my dear.
that's the wind chill.
Oh,
And
my dear. So
have-
4 degrees here, that's nothing then. Anyway, I'm always eager to hear what you have to say, Sheila.
I have several comments. I'll speak quickly to stay within the time. First of all, the poem that you read is very reminiscent of Mary Oliver's poetry, she also writes about wonder and being dazzled and that sort of thing. I wanted to say, this is not original, but is from Phyllis Tickle, a deceased Episcopal laywoman in publishing. And the forward to one of her books, she goes through this area saying that God cleans the attic every 500 years and points out to the things that have happened in history every 500 years and how the 500 years are divided. And we right now are living in the 125 that are going to be chaos, and we're at the beginning of it because nobody's in charge. We don't have a leader. The United States of America is no longer recognized as the leader, you know, by everyone in the world as it used to be. We don't have a JFK. We don't have anyone in theology. We don't even have Mother Teresa or Billy Graham. We don't have anyone in ecology, which you've mentioned. And we don't have anyone in the economy, someone that we all look up to as somebody who's in charge. There's nobody in charge, and that's what we need. And that's why I say we need Jesus, not the Jesus that hangs on the wall or the Jesus that many of us grew up with, but the Jesus that is an honest to goodness human being, the Jesus that preached the great commandment, and the Jesus that lived the gospel for all those who have fallen through what we would call the cracks of society. They're on the margins. They're out of the sandbox. That's the Jesus that we have been called to follow, to emulate. And the other thing is that now I haven't checked this myself, but some of you may have saw it actually on a meme on Facebook. With the Beatitudes, Jesus never said what you had to believe. Whereas if you join a church, you've got to promise you believe this and this and this and go through the creeds. In all of those Beatitudes, Jesus was saying how we are to be, how we are to live, not any creeds that we have to follow. And I believe that that is the possibility that you talk about, is that Jesus offers all these possibilities for us to live as human beings with other human beings. And Marianne, you said, I wrote this the first time you said it, that they may have killed Jesus, but they didn't kill the vision. They didn't kill the mission. And that's why I believe we need to say somebody's in charge. And for me, I like to hope and think that that person is Jesus, the person who showed us how to live so that others might live.
Really, really interesting, Sheila. And yes, you know, Jack might say they killed the poet, but not the poem. Okay, same idea. All right, that the vision of Jesus is one that, yes, continues to live and haunt us, and I think continues to resonate for us, because we're still talking about is this notion of compassion and justice and forgiveness and even loving your enemy, and bringing the marginalized more into the, I mean, you know, stop making these distinctions between us and them, right? It's like, is this really possible? And of course, in our world today, it looks impossible. But Jesus says, this is possible. And I think on some deep, deep level, I'd like to think that we know it's possible. So I think it not only challenges us, but I think it resonates with us. But I know that one of our guidelines is don't challenge. But I'm going to make a comment to piggyback on yours about nobody's in charge and we need somebody to be in charge. I think that that is a real, I think that that vulnerability is potentially very dangerous.
Yes. Yes.
Because as you well know, and I have referred to Ruth Ben-Ghiat's book before, Strong Men. She has written about strong men from Mussolini to present day. And what I really appreciate about what you're saying is that you have identified something that people are saying it's too chaotic, there's too much change. You know, it's sort of like that old thing about, oh, Father, just tell me what to believe and I'll believe it. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? You know, church, tell me what to believe and so that I know that all will be well, right? And we don't have that. And there's also this movement against meta-narratives that say this is the way that it has to be. These are the ultimate truths and all that. You're right. We are in we're in a very different time. And yet I think our vulnerability would be to think that, you know, because I'm big on Jesus being a human being. But what I think is that we mustn't look for another human being to be that kind of leader in this kind of world.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have some pictures of what kind of leaders those are. They're already propped up in other countries. And we claim in our vision of pluralism that that is not the true, good, beautiful way to go. So I understand what you're saying is that we need a North Star, maybe, okay? But I think that Jesus is calling us to look actually within ourselves, to find it, to recognize it, to risk it. Because so much is at stake, not only our humanity, but our humaneness, and now our planet and our future. So I appreciate you're referring to Phyllis Tickle about the axial age, right? That every 500 years or so, that there's some kind of evolutionary, revolutionary change. And I know that there are many who think that, yep, we're in one right now. No question that we are in a time of tremendous transition. And I think, though, that this is why I sort of like the idea of theopoetics, that a poiesis creates, imagines, brings forth something new, novel, that the images challenge us to reimagine, reconstruct, reinvent. And I'm not saying to get rid of our past, we can't, you know, but to realize that we're in a very different age. And so what kind of creative response do we have to this age? Keeping in mind our humanness and our humaneness. And I think Jesus calls us to humaneness.
Yes.
And I know you know this because you've addressed this in so many ways in previous conversations. So, but I like your idea of Jesus as being, now Jack would, I'm above my pay grade here now, but Jack would consider Jesus a Vorstellung, which is a figurative icon
Okay.
of possibility. So in that regard, it's like, okay, I'm still with holding Jesus as my icon of possibility and hope for us. But I think we just need to be a little careful about wanting that to be a strong man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I was writing as you were saying that we are being called to take the risk, to stand out, to be the not in charge in such a way like a dictator, but the
No.
ones that will be the ones that will be out front. And it's a difficult job.
We're responsible.
Yes.
We are responsible for actually our humanity. And most of us have agency to make decisions about our own humanity. Most of us do. Maybe not all of us have agency for that, but most of us have agency about our own humanness and our own humaneness. And so I think, yes, we are responsible for the human project. And we know better. I would like to suggest we know better. And so, yes, I think that the call is the courage to be.
And Jesus as the North Star. I really like that. I like that idea. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, well, Sheila, you're great. And I appreciate your wrestling with me a little bit with this and letting me wrestle with you about the notion of we need a leader.
Thank you, Sheila.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Good back and forth going on there. How about Janet? Janet, can you unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfect. Yeah.
Oh, good. I love what you brought up. I've long thought that what about these ideas and agree with Marcus when he said that Jesus was about, like addressing, it wasn't about being healthy or wealthy or religious duty or political duty or gender or sexuality or whether you were Jewish or not, which group you were in. It was about living from a different place. And it feels to me and long felt one of the people, I don't remember his name. There was a rabbi who talked about open Israel at that time. And there was groups of people who, Jews and non-Jews, proselytes, converts, whoever these groups were, who fell into this category of wanting an open Israel, of a God for everyone, of a way of connecting to God for everyone. And I feel like Jesus wasn't the person who was talking them into it. I think he was giving voice to what was already there, or hinted at, or what people already wished for, or were perhaps already even living. And the way I think of it is like Bob Dylan wasn't the leader of the 60s. He was giving voice to what everybody knew. And unfortunately, then people projected all kinds of nonsense onto Bob Dylan. But just
And
like that
too, by the way, but
and but he deconstructed language. He deconstructed what was going on in a way that gave voice to what people knew. And I think that Jesus was a voice like that, but that voice was very awakened, the way Buddha was awakened, and that the call was not to worship him, but was to be him, to evolve, and not even to technically stop at him. To me, God is evolution. I think I heard that here, and it was just an extraordinary idea that God is evolution, and what you said was creativity. And so that means we don't even have an end point of what we're trying to achieve. It's just like we're moving like that North Star. And that one of the worst things that happened was that that perhaps that lived for 300-400 years, that vision, but then it turned into taking all that away, worshiping him, making him a god. To me, that's so un-Jewish. That's just profoundly un-Jewish. To worship a human being, even if you're the greatest Jew who ever lived, you don't worship the person. You don't worship Abraham or Moses. They became visions of what could be. And so to me, that's what Jesus is about being a person who led, and all the people, back then and since then. It's not just the people back then, it's just the whole force of it being a possibility of moving into a different way. I love what you said about of living this. And like we haven't gotten there yet, but we're on the path of living it, of Jesus being needs to be a totally, to me, it just has to be a totally different vision of that stuff that happened with worshiping him and guilt and heaven and all. The whole story to me is just so it fit perhaps what was needed at that time. I don't know, but it was not at all the vision of what I think he was about. It's about becoming this, as you said, wishing this for ourselves, living in ways that challenge us, bringing us, disrupting, taking us out of the comfort zones, and being that, really truly being that, and growing towards being it with every day.
And I think Jesus, being a human being, tells us this is possible.
Yes, it is possible.
This is not
Yeah.
this is not an idea. This is actually really a way of being.
Yes.
And I love what you're saying, the real distinction between an icon and an idol.
Yes.
We have turned Jesus into an idol.
Mm-hmm.
We've turned God into an idol. And so, it behooves us to think a little bit about the distinction between an icon and an idol. And I think Jack would say Jesus is functioning as an icon, can function as an icon today. And as you said, not so much the faith in Jesus as the faith of Jesus.
Yes.
That things can be better, that things can be different because of who we are. We are capable of this. And Gordon Kaufman makes a really interesting comment about love. He says, we say God is love. But Gordon says a very interesting thing. He said, that's actually very anthropomorphic. And I thought, he suggests that our saying that God is love is part of human development and evolution, to say that human beings have come to a place where we know how important love is, and compassion, and justice, and forgiveness. That's part of the human evolution of of value, how much we value the importance and healing and transformative power of love, and how essential it is for our human existence. And so it is us who say, God is love. Because if God is a symbol for what matters most, then we say, God is love. But I was really struck by him saying that the notion that God is love is actually, it's anthropomorphic. It comes out of our human experience. And so for us to say God is love, I think that God is love, but God is much, much, much more than that.
Yes, and I was going to say that to me, it's not, that other story was about guilt. And today is all about being a victim. It's flipped to the opposite. We're so identified with victimitis almost to the extreme. But to me, it's much more like what Buddhists think of it as you're both the victim and the victimizer.
Yeah.
You have to hold both of those parts, and to grow holding both of those parts. And that from that place, that's where the love is, because otherwise you will always just side with one half of the story and not embody both sides of it, and move from that place.
So our task is huge, but I think that what if Jesus were around today, I think he'd say, we're capable of it.
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
So he
Thank
would,
you so much.
he would urge us on. I'm
Yes.
sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Janet, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say he would urge us on, and he is urging us on.
Yes, yes.
And Marianne, I think for me, it's helpful to, when you keep referring to Jesus as an icon, I always think icon, a window to the sacred. So Jesus is a window to God,
Mhm. Yeah,
which we can see God.
yes. And you know, Jack puts it in the language of intuition, that Jesus is an intuition of God, that we can see him.
Yes.
Right? So, I mean, but I love that icon as a window. That's right. A
Or a
skylight.
skylight. There we go.
Why
There
not?
we go. Yeah. Yeah. So
Jesus, my skylight.
Jesus, my skylight. There's got to be a children's song in there somewhere.
Or a country western song.
Or a country western song. Yes. There's somebody with their hand raised wearing a red sweater, and all it says is iPad.
I see the red sweater. I see Mr. iPad.
I don't know who Mr. iPad is. You're still
Put your-
muted.
You're mute.
Still muted. So you need to go to the lower left-hand corner and unmute yourself.
Lower left. And have you found it? It looks like a little microphone
Yeah.
with a slash in it. If you click on it,
It's a different.
There you
You
go.
hear me
there you
now?
go.
Now
There
we
you go.
Oh,
Perfect.
good.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
You want
Well,
to tell us
I-
who you are?
Pardon me?
You want to tell us who you are, since
Oh,
all we
Len,
I-
Len, my name is Len.
Perfect.
Len. Great. Thanks,
Len,
Len.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to, I guess, but there's something I could do to the iPad so you could see my name, I guess. I don't know.
Yes.
I haven't.
Yeah. Listen,
Okay.
I'm so low tech. This is fine, Len. You and I are about on the same level here.
I'll have to investigate. What I wanted to say was, Jesus has never really been plummeted, his whole, who he really is. I think that Jesus came, he walked this earth, he was on the earth, he gave us great lessons. And then we started to build this bureaucracy of churches and leaders of churches. And we got away from who really Jesus is. And I believe that remember that movement, WWJD,
Right.
what, in the 70s or 80s?
Yeah.
I think that's very viable today because let me give you a very concrete example. In the Catholic Church right now, you have the German bishops who want blessings of same-sex marriages, and they want even more than that. You have the African bishops who say, no way. And they even told Pope Francis, we're not following that. And to my mind, if we simply ask the question, what would Jesus do in this situation? He's not going to walk past these people. He's not going to walk, he's going to reach out to whoever needs help and guidance and who wants to be there. He's not going to make judgments on these people as we do. And the reason we do it is because we built this bureaucracy and we need security. And we're so afraid that if we reach out to different people and people with different problems, we'll be too vulnerable and maybe we'll change this whole structure that we've built up that gives us security.
Right.
And so I really believe that if we really got back to the gospel message, really tried to listen, study the scriptures and really see what Jesus is saying, we could solve a lot of our problems, but we don't do that because we like to separate ourselves with bureaucracy and structure.
Yeah, Len, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, truth is, we live in a very pluralistic, very diverse world. There's so much diversity. And in fact, somebody says God never repeats. Not exactly, you know. So diversity and multiplicity is, you know, we are a multitude, as Walt Whitman said. But it frightens us. The other somehow frightens us. And Jesus really smashed that. I mean, he didn't think in terms of quote unquote the other. And I love what you said, that we haven't really plummeted the depths of Jesus yet. I don't think we have either. I mean, he's almost too much for us. But I personally think that we're at a time where a lot of what he had to say, I think, could save us. Okay. Thanks to you and talking about, you know, our differences and so forth. Believe it or not, I have a little quote here from Aristotle. Listen to this. He says, to see the similar in the dissimilar is the mark of poetic genius. Now, that's
Boy,
not
Mary
saying,
Ann, I got to think of it. Boy, you're giving us a lot to think about on Saturday morning.
yeah, well,
Come
I'm,
on
you
now.
know, but
Lighten up, lighten
and
up.
thank you. That's perfect, Len. Exactly. Lighten up. I mean, I don't know where this came from, but I just happened. It's like, oh my God, I've got this quote from Aristotle, but you prompted it. And, but
Well,
what's,
thank you.
yeah,
Go
thank
ahead.
you. But what's so poignant about this is that it's not that we make the dissimilar similar. It's not that we are seeking to all of us to be the same,
Mhm.
but as Aristotle says, to see the similar in the dissimilar. In other words, that the other is not really the other.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I mean, I think that's kind of what he's getting at. But to see the similar in the dissimilar, you're so different from me, and yet I can see the similarity.
And we're not saying, we're seeing the dissimilar more than the similar.
Yes, exactly. And I
Yes,
think
yeah.
the similar is really in the depths of our humanity, which I think is a good thing. I mean,
Yes.
I'm going to throw this in here. I actually don't think we live in a fallen world. I think that we live in a world that doesn't run the way we think it should, and we are mortal. And I think that's why we think it's fallen. How can I be mortal? It must be a fallen. No, I don't think we live in a fallen world. So it's like but we are felling this world.
Mhm.
But to see the similar in the dissimilar is the mark of, and I love this part of it, poetic genius.
That's good. Yeah,
And I
really.
think I mean, it's like, that's good. Aristotle, not bad, huh? But I think that sort of speaks to a theopoetic sensibility.
Mhm.
So anyway, Len, thank you
Well, thank
for
you, Mary, and I
the
appreciate it.
opportunity to pull this quote out of nowhere. So thank
Okay,
you.
well, listen, when you see iPad, you know that's Len, if I
It's
don't
Len.
get it straight.
Perfect.
Great.
Perfect.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get out of here now.
Thanks.
What do I have? Oh,
There you go.
there we
There.
I'll
Um,
cut down my comments because we've got a lot of questions and I realize time is moving on. So
yeah, this is great. This is a rich discussion. Bruce Robertson, can you unmute?
Thank you so much for these important dialogues, Mary Ann. And I feel, as a trained scientist, that science is helping us to begin to see that Jesus is more relevant than we ever supposed.
can you say a little more about that?
One of the strategies of science is to look into conundrums. For instance, the oil magnates are ignoring what their companies are doing to us and what they are doing to their own children and grandchildren. What's the conundrum there? Another conundrum. Your tax dollars and mine are paying for bombs to carpet bomb the Palestinians. Genocide. What's going on there? Third, some Christians are really promoting Mr. Trump. What an interesting question. What's going on here? Now then, something tragic. When Jesus was arrested, all his male disciples ran and hid in fear. Interestingly, who was at the cross? The women. They were keeping watch. God bless all you dear ladies. Oh, now then, science takes these interesting questions and goes into them. And a very interesting question, Dietrich Bonhoeffer pointed out, beginning his book on the cost of discipleship. When Christ calls a man or a woman, he calls them to die. And that's what good science does. Dies to the assumptions and turns to real seeing, real inquiry, and opening to that mystery.
Wow.
So to truly carry the cross of Jesus today calls us to go deeper into seeing. And that's what our dialogues are intending. Thank you.
That was beautifully put.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, and to die to some of our assumptions and the presuppositions and open ourselves to real seeing. And
An
then
important
make the glimpse of the mystery.
An important corollary to this, you pointed out. We have made Jesus into an idol.
Mhm.
And what's the payoff for idolatry? We promoted Jesus upstairs. And then we say, well, that was Jesus, you know, you can't expect that kind of stuff from me. I'm only human. Jesus was
Right.
fully human,
Yeah,
not an idol.
yeah,
Agreed. That's our hope. That is one of our hopes. I mean, Jesus isn't our only hope, but Jesus is our hope.
yeah.
Bruce, thank you so, so much. And I so appreciate that science, I love your opening remark that science says that Jesus is perhaps more relevant now than we suppose.
Another interesting aspect of modern science, I should let you know I was trained at Oxford and I worked with David Bohm.
Oh, my dear. Okay. Right.
And modern science, we talk about the new paradigm.
Right.
And what is the new paradigm? The new paradigm sees through the illusions of time and space and accepts the fact that we are all connected,
Right.
and therefore all part of the kingdom.
Nice.
Mm.
Nice.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bruce.
Lynn Tolk, you want to unmute yourself?
Yes. Oh gosh, I thought I did. It's just telling me to do it again. There.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. Well, I did this and then I had a message on the screen too. Anyway, I'm sitting here with goosebumps, but I am so grateful.
Here with Theo.
Well, I don't mean from the temperature. I just mean from the excitement. It's wonderful. So many great comments, so many great thoughts. I was raised without Jesus. Not that I was raised in a different religion. It's just that my mother had no use for church, any church. And we didn't even talk about it.
Mine, by the way.
Pardon?
Neither
Oh.
did mine. Mhm.
Okay. So when I got to college, I went to college thinking I wanted to become a psychologist. Unfortunately, I went to college in 1960, and that college Department of Psychology only recognized rats and not people. So I ended up majoring in religion, which is a life-changing thing to have done. It was also life-changing to go to college in New York, having grown up on a farm in Idaho. So that was the first big step in my life. Anyway, I think it was about 1914, or 2014, I finally went ahead and had myself baptized. My mother didn't believe in it, so I'd started going to the Episcopal Church with my daughter, and I actually fell in love with the liturgy.
Yeah.
So I did this, and this was after being a very committed Buddhist for 15 years. And struggling with these two rather disparate images or paths. It was Ramon Panikar that helped me realize that, yes, you can do both. And no, you're not being disloyal or unfaithful or any of that stuff.
Now, those are two great mentors, Jesus and the Buddha.
Oh, yes, yes. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this book, Jesus and the Buddha are brothers. Brothers, I don't know. He was also one of my mentors. Anyway.
Yeah, so where do you want to take us with this? Because I know there are a number of people in the
I
queue.
know, and I didn't.
But I've taken quite a bit of time talking myself, so.
So I have spent the last 3 years writing my own book, which started out to be about the spiritual path. And at least twice I had to stop and redefine my whole book. So it's one reason it's taking me so long. My advisor said that book is my spiritual practice. In this book, in this process, I'm asking all of these questions, every single one of them, which is a little ambitious. And I'm at the end of the book now and realizing I can't answer any of those questions. Not only that, I'm not called to answer any of those questions. What I am called to do, and as the tentative title of my book is Learning to Walk with What Is learning to live with uncertainty, which is seeing Jesus as the call or whatever divine calling speaks to me. And I have come to find Jesus as embodying, or as you say, being an icon for that calling, to create, to go ahead, not only to create something new, but to do it openly. I'm an Enneagram 9, by the way, so I hide from everything and everybody. But to state what I think, not just what everybody I have studied thinks, and that they're all in there too, but to publicly declare it's okay. As John Lott has said, we're not there yet. If there is a there, you know, and that's not my business to determine that there. My business is to determine what I am doing right now and what path I am following and what good I can possibly do for those people around me.
Sure, that's right, right. And you know, the journey you're on is actually the journey that we're all on. And I don't know, you know, I mean, T.S. Eliot and so many others have talked about, you know, it's the journey, it's not so much the destination. But the uncertainty thing, you know well that John Keats has this wonderful phrase, negative capability, which is our ability to live with ambiguity. Okay, that's what he calls negative capability, to live with ambiguity.
Yeah,
bitching about it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't put it quite that way.
Go on anyway.
Yeah, exactly, but without, you know, so don't be too hard on yourself about coming up with the answers. I really think that the art of asking the open question is, I think that will be the way.
Yeah, that is the answer.
But anyway, so Lynn, thank you. And press on, keep, you know, I love the fact that this book is taking a long time because you continue to listen to yourself. And it's calling you to continue to, in a sense, reinvent.
Yeah.
Rediscover, reimagine. So
evolving.
Yeah, good. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Enjoy it.
Thank you for being here.
You too. Thank
All
you.
right. Jim, hi. Jim.
Oh,
Good morning, everyone.
good morning, Jim. Hi.
I have 3 quick points today.
Great.
The first one is that I like the deconstruction, reconstruction attitude that we all seem to be taking. And I think that is necessary. And I think we should start at the top of the list, which is God, Jesus, the Bible, heaven and hell, the organized church, and then life, our own lives. And if we could understand all of those things better than we do now and understand them in the modern world, we'd be better off. Number 2 point.
Love it.
I'm glad the previous speaker mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh, because I have a quote from him that I want to read to everybody. It's very short.
Great.
He says, I think God is on earth inside every living being. What we call the divine is none other than the energy of awakening, of peace, of understanding, and of love, which is to be found not only in every human spirit, but in every species on earth. Thich Nhat Hanh.
Love it.
And that's absolutely correct in my judgment.
I agree. And if we really saw it that way, wouldn't we treat one another in the world differently?
We would. And that leads me to my 3rd point.
Okay.
We have an immigration problem in this country and a border problem. And I'm hoping somebody on this Zoom today has a better connection to President Biden than I do, because I have a solution.
Let's hear it, Jim.
I think the churches in America would be delighted to take a busload of immigrants and bring them to their community. You'd bring them to Bend, Oregon. I'd bring them to Tupelo, Mississippi. And we could integrate those 40 immigrants and their families and their children into our community easily. And there are 10,000, there are 20,000, there are 100,000 communities in this big, great country. And we can absorb all of that problem just by they come across the border, they're recorded, we know who they are, they put them on the bus and send them out. Because we got cities waiting, just clamoring to get them.
What a way to increase church membership.
Well, yes. But those are my comments today.
Great, Jim, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Here's to deconstruction and really seeing the beauty in one another, and here's to welcoming the stranger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. Always good to see you.
Mary Ann, do we have time for one more
I
here?
think we do. And then, yes.
Great. Okay. How about Rudy? Hi,
Yes,
Rudy.
hello, and thank you very much, Mary Ann. Thank you, everyone who has spoken. I would suggest that another history dividing point would be Darwin and Company, in the sense that our scriptures and creeds and a lot of theological language was written when everybody believed in a stable universe, and now we know we are in an evolving, emerging universe. And so we need to rethink a whole lot of things.
Well done.
And the second point about Jesus I'd like to make is, I believe Paul in the letter to the Romans understood something that we haven't quite unpacked for ourselves yet, when he says that Jesus was the second Adam. Adam as the Adam, the human one, which is really what the Hebrew says. We are in Adam. We are all Adam. We are all, and Adam as non-gendered. Adam is the human one, and Jesus as the second human one, inviting us to look to Jesus to figure out what it means to be human. And there's a whole lot more to be said there, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Rudy. And I think too that Jesus is one we can look at to know what it means to be human and humane. I think we can take another one. Thank you, Rudy. So appreciate that.
Kathy.
Yes, I'm so grateful to be with you all and for the thought-provoking, very thoughtful contributions of everybody, and Marianne, of your leadership of this and the thought of Christianity and where we're headed. Your comment about Brandon's, and I may not have understood it completely, about Jesus may having passed, no longer being as relevant, maybe has to do with the objectifying or making Jesus and God into subjects through the church,
Or
through
into
history. Or objects. So
Or into
that's
objects.
what I meant. That's what I meant. Thank you so
Reifying
much.
that. Yeah, reifying. Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Thank
Making
you so much.
mistakes. Mhm.
Yes, yes, yes. In understanding them, the church has certainly through history and understanding God and Jesus as beliefs and things we need to believe in and that help us be secure. But instead, as we remember that God is I am, is a movement, is a being. Jesus constantly saying I am in the Gospel of John, connecting Jesus' self with God as being a living, breathing in today, in this moment, and throughout history, and in our tomorrows as well. And I wonder if the future of Christianity maybe is more in connecting once again with God's being in our daily lives, and as God's living being still in all of us. And remembering that Jesus was always working toward wholeness of the human being, of our world. And can we reconnect? Can we ground and root ourselves in God once again? You know, Richard Rohr in the Center for Action and Contemplation and Action, so often in our getting back to our roots and staying connected, and in that connection then acting out of that to be agents for that wholeness and healing again, and also to be transformed by our Christianity. So it's a living thing. And is this maybe more maybe more attention to our transformation, maybe part of our turning to what Christianity may be looking like. And Jesus is a well that is never dry. You know, even looking at what Jesus taught and what his examples were, we haven't begun to scratch the surface in all of history of what's truly there, as you have suggested.
Yeah. Yeah, great. More to be said about that. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, and for us to reflect more deeply on what is the nature of our own being. What is that? To close, let me say that February 10th, which is our next second Saturday, we'll have a guest. His name is Belden Lane. He'll bring a slightly different angle to our conversations. He's a pastor, he's a Presbyterian pastor and an academic, but he's a lover of nature, a lover of souls. He converses with the mystics. He converses with the natural world and has wisdom from both to share with us. His topic is going to be standing together in awe, 4 stages in our learning how to love the natural world. As we all know, Christianity has not been the greatest steward of the natural world, but there have been great stewards of the natural world in the Christian tradition, and Belden will help bring that awareness to us. So February 10th, we have a guest, Belden Lane. Let me also say that next Saturday, the 20th, we're going to have a 3rd Saturday reflection. Now, these we offer occasionally. They're small group opportunities, and we're going to have another one next Saturday for those who want to be part of a small group. I mentioned today that I would share a little bit of my own story with Jesus. I have not done that, but I will next Saturday. And what I'd like us to do next Saturday, I'm going to tell you what the prompt is in advance. I want to continue to talk about Jesus and your thoughts about Jesus, your experience of him or lack of thereof, or, you know, how do we grapple with Jesus and how is Jesus grappling with us? So for those of you who are interested in being in a small group and getting to know each other a little bit and having conversation in a small group, 3rd Saturday reflection will be next Saturday. I'll send out that invitation on Monday. Now for our closing music, it's going to be Bobby Dylan. And it's from his album, Slow Train Comin'. And my understanding is that he wrote the songs for Slow Train Comin'. This all came out of his period of time at the Vine Church in LA. So this was sort of from his Christian period. And the cut that I'm going to play is, "Gotta serve somebody." And he says, well, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. And as we've talked about today, we're responsible for our beliefs or our hopes, for our actions. As I said earlier, I think most of us have agency in taking responsibility for our own actions. And we have agency. We can make a difference. As someone said, you become what you love. You become what you love. So Bob Dylan asks us today, or says to us today, you're going to have to serve somebody. So choose you this day, whom or what you shall serve, because you become what you love. Thank you so much for today. You all make a huge difference in my own sense of liveliness and hopefulness. So glad to be with you. Look forward to seeing some of you next Saturday, and look forward to seeing more of you on the 10th of February with Belden Lane. I'll see you in coffee hour in about 5 minutes for those who can stay. And then we'll continue with those who still have raised hands at coffee time. Thank you so much.